Hey, this is Digital Dave, another cryptocurrency and blockchain update. Today, I have with me Amrit Kumar. He's actually the co-founder and president of Zilliqa. Amrit, welcome to the call.
Thank you very much for inviting me over. Lovely being here, Dave.
Glad to have you. Let me just kind of give the viewers a little background about me and why, you and I are talking now. I've been a Zilliqa investor for quite some time. And I've got a really, really big membership group, and they are so hungry for information about Zilliqa, because I will say at least half of them are investors in your project, Amrit. So, I might as well get you on the call here and let's really dig into Zilliqa and just find out what the heck really are we investing in. So first though, if you don't mind, please if you don't mind, give us a brief background about yourself and how you evolved into creating the Zilliqa blockchain project.
Right. So my background is scientific research. So before starting Zilliqa, together with some of the other co-founders, I was doing a PhD in computer security and privacy. So basically, that was a 3-year sort of PhD. And basically, I was looking into understanding what happens when you download certain software systems on your machine. For example, let's say antivirus. And what sort of impact you have on your security and privacy when you're using such a software. So for example, let's say if you install an antivirus software, it may scan all the files that you have on your machine, right? For example, it may check your JPEG files, it may check your documents, Word docs, and so on. And in some cases, it may send information about that file, those files, to the backend server, so the vendor from where you downloaded that antivirus. So there's a lot of security and privacy implications around using and installing some software. So my idea was my work was basically to understand, how that impacts your privacy, how that impacts your security. But over time, this was around 2016, I would say. And then I was, around that time, Bitcoin obviously had become popular. People were looking into it. Traders were trading it. But academics were still on the fence about it because they felt that, look, it's a new tech. We're still not sure about the rigor that Bitcoin's white paper had. So if you look at Bitcoin's white paper, it's a very white paper kind of document. It's not very rigorous in that sense. So scientists were on the fence about it initially. But when they realized by 2016, 2017 that it's really going big and people are actually using it, it forced them to actually look into Bitcoin from a scientific angle. And then they started to say, look, you may not like the approach that the Bitcoin white paper has, but there's definitely merit to it. There may not be enough rigor, but there's definitely merit to it. And then they started to look into the different scientific problems and research problems that Bitcoin and blockchains can create. So for example, I remember the first few papers that were published around Bitcoin was around privacy, because it was very apparent to people that when you transact in Bitcoin, everything happens upon a public chain. And therefore, you have to be careful about what you could reveal from a privacy angle. So it was around that time that I also got interested into blockchain and crypto, but from a research angle. And so I was looking for an opportunity to get into blockchain, try to do some research around that. And that's why I moved over to Singapore, where I started to work with a professor at National University of Singapore. And my angle was, again, privacy. So I was interested into understanding how privacy preserving blockchains like Dash back in the day, Monero and Zcash, and what sort of privacy they give you in practice. So of course, they were being promoted as very heavy on privacy. But when you actually use it in practice, do you actually get that privacy or not? That was kind of my scientific question that I had in mind. So my venture into blockchains was first through Monero, then into Bitcoin, and then into Zilliqa. So that's how I started it.
Okay. Well, you're talking about privacy. And you said that was a bit of a concern for you. And then, Monero was supposed to be the solution, and Dash, et cetera. Now, but you're not saying Zilliqa is not a privacy coin, though.
No.
Okay. But that led you down that path, though. Is that right?
Exactly. So the angle was that at that point, when I had finished my work on Monero, I was kind of looking for the next opportunity. So what would be the next research problem to look for? And around that time, my advisor back then at NUS, in the university where I was working, he had published a paper on sharding, an academic paper on sharding, which was written alongside with the CEO of Kyber Network, Loy Lu. So Loy Lu and me and some of the other folks were in the same lab. He was doing PhD, I was doing postdoc.
Mhm.
And so he had written a paper on sharding, and my advisor felt that, look, scalability is going to be a challenge because we had seen CryptoKitties back then, we had seen ICOs happening, and how one single, I think EOS ICO or something had blocked the entire Ethereum network.
Mhm.
So he had this idea of commercializing that paper in some way. So this idea of sharding, implement that into practice. And so he approached me one day and said, look, I would like to sort of commercialize this sharding idea into some way. And would you be interested in joining that project? So that's how a team got assembled. And I was one of the co-founders there. Of course, moving from an academic paper to an actual production system is a long stretch. So we had to make a lot of adjustments on the initial paper to make it work. And that eventually became Zilliqa.
Okay.
But yeah, Zilliqa is not a privacy coin at this point.
Yeah. So Zilliqa is obviously, so it's not a privacy coin, but what you're solving with the sharding is you basically have instant scalability. And I mean, really, it's basically infinite. Is that kind of what sharding really is?
Yeah, so very, very simply put. So imagine, for example, let's say Bitcoin Ethereum network today, right? When you send a transaction, what you basically do is you say, okay, I want to send, let's say 10 Bitcoin to Dave. Here's my signature. And then, I basically push that transaction out to the network. What network does is, imagine your network has, let's say 10,000 nodes. What basically network does is it checks whether your transaction is valid. So it checks whether you have enough money in your account, whether the signature is valid and everything is correct. And then if it looks valid, then they basically process that transaction. And by processing, I mean that it deducts balance from your account, puts the money in the recipient's account, and basically updates the ledger. So it's very decentralized, very secure. So even if, let's say, one of the 10,000 nodes go down, you still have enough decentralization to process your transaction. But it's also very redundant, right? Because imagine sending a $10 transaction and having 20,000 nodes processing that $10 transaction. And that's kind of the reason why blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum don't scale, because you have, the more nodes you add, the more time it takes for the transaction to get processed. So the idea of sharding is simple, where you say, okay, we don't need 10,000 nodes. We need to break that down into smaller groups. So you could have, for example, 10 nodes, 10 groups, each containing 1,000 nodes. So you have 10,000 in total. So that each subgroup that we call shard can process transactions in parallel. So for example, let's say if you have 2 shards in the network, your transactions will always go to shard number 1. My transactions will always go to shard number 2. And these 2 shards can process transactions in parallel. So the more shards you have, the more transactions you can process. In theory, yes, you could process infinite transactions, but in practice, there are practical limitations around bandwidth, sharing transactions and those sort of things,
right?
Which limits, which basically what you will eventually see is that as you increase your your shard counts, the number of groups that you create, it will linearly increase, and at some point it will become Plato. It's not clear at what point it becomes, but I feel that around, you can easily process around 5,000 to 10,000 transactions per second using a sharded network pretty easily.
Okay, so that's 4 times what Visa processes. So I mean, there's 2 to 4 times. So I think Visa is like 2,500 transactions per second. So maybe it's not quite that. Maybe less than 2,000. So a lot better than Visa. We'll just say that, right?
So again, depends on sometimes Visa can process large number of transactions because let's say, especially around let's say Christmas Eve or when there's a lot of volume being done, they obviously scale their platform up. But generally speaking, I think they process around 2,000 to 4,000 transactions.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, well, good. That's great. Maybe I want to ask about how you compare to other projects. I mean, I'm an investor in some of the projects I'm going to bring up, but I want to, because I like to kind of, diversify, spread my risk, et cetera, et cetera. I think I said earlier, I've been a Zilliqa investor for a long time. A lot of my group are Zilliqa investors as well. So I really like what I saw a couple of years ago with what you guys are doing. And I know you're a 4-year-old project now, and it seems like you're a new project, but there's so much you have to build for really to get recognized. I mean, there's so much work. I mean, you got 4 years worth of work already behind you. And some people say, this is a new project. It's not really a new project, but I want to compare, if you don't mind me asking. So obviously you scale better than Ethereum. Do you ever see Ethereum really coming close to your scalability ever? 2.0 or anything like that?
Ethereum also plans to do sharding. That's true.
Okay.
But I think the problem that Ethereum has is it is a system that is up and running and has been up and running for quite a while now, which means that it's like a building which you have already erected, And now you're trying to change the foundation. It's very difficult.
Right.
So that's kind of the challenge. Again, I wish Ethereum Foundation the very best, but it's very challenging what they're doing. And that's kind of why it's taking time. Sharding is something that they were talking about like around 2-3 years ago. And still what they have done so far is phase 0 of sharding, which is having the beacon chain. And only at the phase 4 is when you actually see transactions being processed. A transaction, I mean, smart contracts getting processed in a sharded environment. And we are still at phase 0, which means that there's a long way to go. And again, the approach is right, which is you start small, you add bits and pieces over time in an iterative way. But it's a long road for them. Again, I don't know what the date would be, but just to give a sense to your listeners and viewers, Ethereum right now is around phase 0, and around phase 4 is when you can actually see sharding into real action with smart contracts.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's challenging for them for sure.
Yeah, that's a good analogy about trying to redesign a building after it's already been constructed and trying to change the foundation. That's a great analogy, because that's the way I've that's the best one I've heard of. But yeah, they were basically trying to change. I'll come up with my own, trying to change the design of an airplane while it's in mid-flight. How about that one?
Exactly. in that way, chains like Zilliqa and some of the others like Cardano or Solana and others, we had that privilege and benefit to start something from scratch, because then you could make very drastic changes. Right. Which Ethereum unfortunately doesn't have that liberty and privilege.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to be at risk of doing this, Zilliqa versus this. I don't want to make into that too much, but I really, what I'm trying to do is trying to dig as much information so I can learn more, and obviously for the viewers. Now, I was watching a video of yours. Someone that was interviewing you, it was a couple of days ago, I believe, and I think you said that you have more decentralized apps built on Zilliqa blockchain than, say, Solana, and that was a surprise to me. Because I know Solana has a lot of dApps built on it, but you were doing 10 or 100 times. I can't remember what the number was, but you're doing a lot more than Solana. Is that correct?
Okay, so let me clarify this. So what happened was someone in our Telegram community came to me and said, Solana has 100x more dApps than Zilliqa, which is not true. Okay, so I corrected him. I said, no, this is not true. Solana doesn't have 100x more dApps than Zilliqa. Then the person corrected himself and said, okay, I maybe added one more zero. So he said, okay, Solana has 10x more dApps than Zilliqa. I said, even that is not true. Okay. I believe that, again, it's very difficult to count, because even at Zilliqa, every other day, there's a new application that pops up. And sometimes it's very difficult to follow them, because they are starting up, they only have, let's say, 5-10 follows on Twitter. It's difficult to capture some of those projects. But I do believe that Zilliqa, even though, of course, Solana has really seen quite a bit of traction in the recent months, I do feel that the critical mass number of dApps that Zilliqa has is competitive compared to any other. Of course, not Ethereum. Ethereum is a bit ahead of the game. Right. But compared to any other chain that's coming up, Zilliqa is right there. I can't compare the numbers, because sometimes very difficult to count them, because one. Even foundations have difficult time counting all the dApps that are out there, because it's a public chain. Anyone can go and build anything, and tracking that person who sits somewhere in China or Siberia or India, it's very difficult. But I do feel that many of the new chains out there, including Zilliqa, Zilliqa is at par with some of the other chains out there in terms of number of applications. If you look at, very recently, I was also looking at. One point is about number of dApps. The other point is about number of transactions. We talked about scalability, right? So scalability sort of tells you what's the capacity of the network, right? How much the network can process at max. So that's one metric. The other metric is how much the network receives, how many transactions the network actually receives in practice. So for example, you could imagine a network that claims to have, let's say, to process 1 million transactions per second, but it only receives 10 transactions. What's the point? It means that the traction is not there. Right. So very recently, I think a couple of months ago, I tried to check all the blockchains in top 100, I think, or top 50, 70, and tried to sort of rank them in the number of transactions that they receive on a daily basis. And Zilliqa was ranked number 5 or 7 somewhere in that ranking, which gives you a sense that there's and again, we could all debate about what kind of transactions they are and all that, but that I think is also a useful metric to look at.
Yeah, I'm looking at, it's funny you're talking about that because I'm looking at, okay, because a couple of weeks ago, one of your team members sent me this PDF. It has, and I'll call it like a Zilliqa map, but I guess it's probably called different, something different, but it just talks about all the stuff that Zilliqa's got going on. And I'm on looking at it right now because you guys are, like you said, ranks number 7 for, well, this is actually token holders versus users, and you're ranked number 7, looks like 2240. Well, actually help me out here. So
Yeah,
help me out here. So, okay, sorry, I'm
looking.
looking at Uniswap as number 1, 1inch exchange, and then Balancer, and then you're number 7. So can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. So, I was, over the last, I think 2 or 3 months, I've been excessively obsessed by number of users, because what I realized is, if you look at the broader, crypto community, even if you just focus on, let's say, Ethereum, for example, right, which is of course the biggest, network out there, it has about 140 million addresses. So there are 140 million, let's say, users or contracts that own Ether. Okay. Right. So which is of course decent large, right? Now, if you look at the number of people or the number of addresses that are actually engaged in DeFi activities, it's about 1 to 2 million. Now you can see the difference, right? It's less than 1% around. So around 1% of token holders actually go and use any of the platforms, any of the dApps out there. So what I'm basically saying is that 99% of Ethereum holders have never used any of the dApp that has been built on Ethereum. And if you think about it, this is we have been fighting and we have been trying to convince people to go and build and all that, but no one is using it, and that's the challenge. And you're talking about Balancer and Uniswap. That's also a very critical measure, right? So what I tried to do was, of course, you can build all sorts of dApps, but like it or not, DEXs are the dApps which attracts the most volume, because this is a place where you have all tokens, people go and trade those tokens. So that's the place which is kind of the center of DeFi in some way, right? Now, if you look at, if you just focus on DEXs today and try to look at the number of unique addresses that interact with a DEX on a daily basis. Of course, Uniswap is the biggest one. So it has probably, I think, 10K users interacting on a daily basis. The biggest, let's say, the second largest DEX in some way on Ethereum is Curve, which is a stablecoin DEX, where you can trade like assets. Number of users who trade on that asset is 1/4 of what number of people who are trading on Zilliqas. So it blew my mind, because if you look at the kind of, and again, if you take a look at, for example, Synthetics, which is one of the biggest DeFi, one of the darlings of Ethereum, around synthetic assets. The number of people who are actually trading on Synthetics on a daily basis is less than 10 people.
Wow.
So it blew my mind that there is a large, so what we have been able to do so far is we have been able to bring a lot of investors in the space, but we have not been able to bring enough users in the space. And that's my challenge.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, let me ask you this, Amrit. But who is going to be your user, though? Obviously, you want people to build applications, dApps on your platform. But the average investor, they're buying these tokens as an investment. They're not going to be using it, though. But how would you get these people to actually use it, though?
Right. So one thing that, again, I would like to highlight before I offer solutions is one thing that we have to highlight is to take, for example, Facebook as an example. If you count the number of retail investors in Facebook through all the broker apps and Robinhood and the likes of whatnot, right? The number of retail investors is much, much smaller than the number of users that Facebook has.
Okay, so it's flip-flopped. Okay, I got you.
It's completely flipped.
Okay.
It is completely the other way around. And so, in a way, blockchains have done one thing right, which is they have been able to open the opportunity of investments to everyone. That's really powerful. That's really good. What we have been really bad at is converting those people into crypto. Now, let me propose you another, before I go into solution, let me propose one more sort of insight, which is, if you think about ICOs, if you think about why people actually did ICOs and why people did token generation event and all that, was because they wanted an initial set of users, right? Because you knew that if, for example, imagine, for example, a protocol that has a proof of stake system, right? If you don't distribute your tokens among VCs or other people in the space, you won't have people who would come and stake, right? So you want an initial distribution of the tokens so that people would have enough tokens to come and participate in your proof of stake algorithm, right? So that was one of the initial ideas. So my first observation is that if the idea for TGEs and if the idea for ICOs was to bootstrap an initial set of users, we have generally failed at that.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is multiple. One is take a look at DeFi, because DeFi obviously is the center of all the activity that's happening in the blockchain space today. Mm-hmm. Imagine an average user who comes on the platform and wants to use a DeFi application. Let's say, for example, Uniswap or Zilswap or of that kind. The first thing that he has to learn is impermanent loss, right? Any average user is unable to use any DeFi dApp today unless he or she watches a 1-hour video done by his favorite influencer. Mm-hmm. And that is what's problematic in this space. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that influencers are not doing a good job. They are really helping and bringing these users on board. Mm-hmm. But it's developers who I think missing the point. They're missing the point because today when I download a regular app from App Store, I don't have to go and read a 50-page developer docs to be able to know how to use that app. Mm-hmm. I just go and download, let's say, a banking app, and I just play around with it, and I'm done.
Right. They could be blockchain apps, probably not, but they could be. You would never know it. Exactly.
So what I feel is that developers are. So what I often call developers are building apps for themselves in some way. Again, It might be a bit harsh a statement, but
that is interesting. That is very, very interesting, because I've always been about the customer, build things and serve the customer first. It's all about the customer experience. And that's interesting you said that. So they're actually creating these apps for themselves and not really what people want or need in the real world. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. So
I mean, it's not, I don't think it's harsh at all. I mean, this is a reality that I'm glad you said that. This is great.
Yeah, again, I'm also guilty of that. So I'm not saying that, Zilliqa as a chain is not guilty of that, but I feel that we have to understand that we are making mistakes. And one mistake, obviously, that the applications that we're building, in terms of UI UX, it is designed especially for people who are experts, people who come from Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, people who know finance very well to be able to use those apps. Or an average user is very simply put, let's say, you take a random guy on the street and ask him what an APY is, he won't be able to tell you. But if you ask him what an interest rate is, he might be able to tell you what a simple interest means.
Yeah.
And it's also about lingo. It's also about the jargon that we're creating over time. We could simplify all of that. When you go on a banking application, people understand what returns mean. People understand what yield means. People understand what interest rate means. Mm-hmm. But APY is complicated for them. They don't get it, even though it's the same thing and they don't get it. Mm-hmm. So it's also about developers to be able to tone down and bring the language to a level where an average user can understand. And we are not doing that. And we are deliberately in some way inventing new terms on a daily basis. And I'm not saying to confuse people, but it doesn't make people's lives easier.
So what's the next step then? How do you get people to really start creating products and applications that people are going to actually use? Like, well, for example, I just saw this the other day. I think it was yesterday. I saw on Twitter about Zilwall. I mean, maybe I didn't. I want to make sure I understand it correctly, because I read two different things about Zilwall. Well, primarily it was like a social media platform. Is that what it is? No, so then I read something a little different later, but yeah, help me out what that is.
Yes, Zilwall is essentially a collaborative platform for design and paintwork. So imagine, for example, this is something that happened, I think a couple of years ago on Reddit as well, a long time back. They had a similar project on Ethereum as well, where the idea is, let's say you create a canvas on a blockchain with, let's say, 5 by 5 pixel size. And then collaboratively, you come and, okay, if you're a painter, you design something on that painting. Someone else comes in, he also designs that painting. Then this canvas becomes more like a collaborative painting rather than a work of art by just one person. What you could do, for example, is imagine in a broader scale, let's say 2 well-known painters come together and paint something together in public. And then what they could do is they could sort of auction it off in the marketplace. And then whatever the proceeds comes out of that auction could be distributed back to all the collaborators and contributors to that painting. So that's the idea behind Zilwall. It encourages people to come and collaborate on paintings.
Okay. So that was that was the second thing I read, but originally I thought it was going to be, so it still is a social media platform then. But it's not, it's not like a Twitter though. It's not like a Twitter or like a Reddit type platform.
No.
Is there anything, is there ever going to be like a Twitter competitor on the blockchain?
Well, if you see today that Twitter itself is trying to build a decentralized sort of Twitter in some way. It's very clear, I think, the entire space that there is a need for decentralized social media.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by this is twofold. One, of course, a platform where you don't get, or presidents or people don't get banned for saying something. So it should be open. No one should be policing that platform, number one. Number two is the community should be involved in some way to help you fact check in some way. So if someone is saying something, the community should have the power and the right to be able to fact check that. And number three is, like Patreon, you want to be able to have a platform where you can monetize your fan base. Today, Twitter, of course, the design of Twitter is very different from YouTube, right? On Twitter, for example, the contents are very recent in some ways. So the older content are very hard to find. The Twitter basically it's designed to promote recent content. So the idea is, could you build a version where you could monetize from your fan base that you have, something like Patreon, but more decentralized? So of course, I do believe that we are going to get there very soon. Maybe it might get built by Twitter itself, or maybe other external parties might chip in. But I do feel that a decentralized social media is coming for sure.
Okay. I mean, you guys working on the Zilliqa blockchain, I mean, you can't go out and build all these little apps that we may need. I mean, you guys are busy working on your own project. And like you said earlier, the community, I mean, it's open source, so a community can just start building whatever they want. And I hope they start building something that, we need more decentralized solutions for social media. And I hope it comes, and maybe this message that you're sending out, we'll get to them and say, hey, we actually need a product for the people, and not just for the devs. So, I hope that people get the point.
To be honest with you, if you compare DeFi or compare them with, let's say, NFT and social tokens.
Yeah.
Even though, you could argue whether an Ethereum rock or Ethereum penguin or apes or ducks or how valuable they are.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, you can connect with it. It's much easier to understand. It's much easier to get involved in NFTs and social tokens than DeFi. DeFi is much more involved. It requires a certain level of, again, I'm not saying that you have to be finance graduate to be able to understand what's happening, but still you need to put your brain to work, which is something that you don't want from a user. You want users to come on board, click a few things, and then they're done. That's what you want from users. That's not what DeFi offers today. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about NFTs. I'm glad we'll go ahead and segue into that then. So can you talk about, I saw this little nifty little trailer about demons, or decentralized monsters, I guess what it stands for. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so again, a lot of these projects, as you mentioned a while ago, that Zilliqa is a platform. So our goal has mostly been to seed, sometimes give grants to people to build different things. And sometimes whenever we build an application that creates tentacles for different things. For example, when we worked with a company called Switcho, we gave them a grant to be able to develop a decentralized exchange, that's ZilSwap. And once we had ZilSwap, we had all sorts of applications being built with which we had no involvement, to be honest. So around 20-25 projects got built on their own because the developer community had all the basic tools and infrastructure needed to be able to build everything on top. So again, Demons, coming back to your question, Demons is something that is not, I won't say that it's Zilliqa's product. It's a product that is being built by the community itself.
Okay.
So the idea is that it combines fungible and non-fungible tokens in some way. So basically, it's so they have a token that's called DMZ token. So what you could do with this is you will have, you have cards that you can buy, and the price of the card is dependent on a bonding curve. So it's pre-decided under bonding curve. So for example, whoever comes first, they will get the card at a cheaper price, and after a while it starts increasing at a certain rate. And once you have those cards, there is a gamified experience around that. So you can, for example, level up by paying something more, or you can play around, use that cards for different games. And then there's a fungible token element that allows you to, top up, level up your game. For example, let's say if you have a card that does something, if you want to level up and give more power to your card, you can then put more fungible tokens into it, and then it levels your.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that, because this is interesting. So that would be a fungible token, not a non-fungible token. So a fungible token means you can change its attributes. Is that basically the difference between an NFT and I guess an NFT then?
Yeah. So it has the cards which are NFTs. Okay. So these are basically digital cards that you can buy. And then you have DMZ token, which is the fungible token. And you have to use that fungible token to be able to level up your cards. So for example, let's say if you want to change the name of your, let's say this is the card is basically a monster in some way.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you want to change the name of the monster, if you want to change certain attributes around that, you need to put that fungible token to work.
Yeah. Or an ape with a sandwich in its mouth. The degen apes, as some people on the main know about this. Okay. Exactly. I love blockchain.
The good thing.
There's never a dull moment in blockchain. Never a dull moment.
The good thing about some of these projects is, it helps. People are still struggling with this idea of NFTs, right? And what some of these projects are doing by combining fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens, they're making that, that they're basically bringing NFTs. Putting NFTs in the background, putting the fungible tokens in the forefront, and yet trying to introduce non-fungible tokens to someone who doesn't understand it. So that's why I like this hybrid approach in some way, which I think those who are still wary of NFTs, who don't understand why people are buying ducks and penguins and apes and
spending
whatnot,
hundreds of thousands of dollars on these things.
I think this is something, a way for them to understand the value of NFTs via fungible tokens.
Yeah. Okay. What about, we talked about Ethereum earlier a little bit. I know you're going to have the Zilliqa ETH bridge. I know you're building on that. Can you give us ETA on that?
Yeah, so literally we announced, I think 2 days ago or yesterday, the fact that we are undergoing a mainnet upgrade next week, I think on Monday. And the idea in that upgrade is to be able to have all the features necessary at the protocol layer. So at the client level, we are going to add everything that's needed to be able to enable the bridge. However, the bridge is still dependent on Polynet, which is the middleware that we're going to use to bridge between Zilliqa and Ethereum. So what they have, of course, as you probably may have seen, that they were recently hacked and they are trying to fix their bugs and everything.
Right.
So they haven't completely opened their network yet, but as soon as they're open, we should be ready to go. So I would say that I don't have an exact date right now because we are dependent on this external party, but otherwise we are internally fully ready to go live after the mainnet upgrade that happens next week.
Okay. Now this is a question. I'm a non-dev, so this is a question. This is a non-dev question. Do you have to use middleware to have a bridge between Ethereum and Zilliqa?
In principle, no. So you could build your own solution. That's true, but it's something that you don't want to do if there's already solution. It's like, do you want to build a chain link like system for yourself, or do you want to use something that already exists?
That makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Of course, we could have built our own middleware, or we could have built our own solution. But if there was something that was being used, we felt that we could just utilize it in the way we could utilize Chainlink, for example.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that. Okay, and I just read recently about you're going to have not necessarily you, but there will be GZIL staking. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So there is again a community project called Pillar, which is a MakerDAO-like system on Zilliqa.
Okay.
The difference between MakerDAO and Pillar is basically that Pillar does not have MKR token. So Pillar has the DAI version, which is called the PIL token, which is the stablecoin token, but it doesn't have the governance token MKR. So what Pillar has done is it has replaced that MKR token with GZIL. So if you want to do a governance around Pillar, GZIL will be the token that will be used. So now what they're doing is they're adding more features beyond governance for GZIL in Pillar. So of course, one you can do is you can decide, for example, using your GZIL, the interest rate that you have to pay. So Pillar, as I said, is a stable coin. So you put your assets into Pillar, you are able to mint the stable coin, and then you have to return that stable coin back. And when you return that, you have to pay an interest rate. So basically, the GZIL governance system basically could decide on what that interest rate would be. Number two, what they're also doing, they are trying to encourage that participation in some way. So what they're also doing is, if you are participating in that governance process, then whatever interest rate comes back to the system, a portion of that could go back to GZIL token holders. The third thing that they're doing is a portion of the liquidation. So for example, let's say if you're not able to return your pillar back, so whatever you borrowed, there will be a penalty, and basically your asset will get liquidated. And when that gets liquidated, a portion of that also gets used to buy diesel from the market and burnt, and they burn it. So there are three ways in which diesel token holders can benefit. One is, of course, they can decide on the interest rate for pillar protocol. Number two is when they participate in governance, they can get a share. That's this where staking comes into picture, which is they can stake. And once they have stake, they can get a percentage of the interest rate that comes back. And number three is once there's a liquidation of the collateral, then again, a portion of that asset could be used to buy diesel from the market and then burned so that it creates scarcity for diesel token holders.
Okay. Yeah, and they are becoming scarce. I believe the GZILs are going to stop being minted in about 40 days, 45 days, something like that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, right? about that range, yes. So
okay.
About 40 days, it will stop. And I think, again, my calculations may be wrong, so we'll start to see until the last day. But my feeling is that we're not going to go beyond 500,000.
Oh, really? 500,000, not 700,000. I think that was the original number.
Yeah, that's
the original estimate.
Cap. Yeah, that's the max cap.
Oh, that's the cap. Oh, so about 500,000. Okay. Okay.
I think 500,000 would be the target, I think.
What is now I know the GZIL token is a governance token, but if someone doesn't want to participate in the DeFi or anything like that or staking, how valuable would that be just for holding it and being a governance token for Zilliqa? I mean, will the GZIL holders, will they have a lot of say-so on how the project's going to move? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so of course, GZIL, the reason why we felt that governance tokens like GZIL would be important for Zilliqa is because we had seen a flurry of governance tokens in the Ethereum space, like Uni, Comp, and all sorts of tokens that are out there in the DeFi space. Yeah. We felt that it would be interesting to have one token that governs all in some way. So it governs at the protocol layer, it helps you govern at the application layer as well. So far, for example, we have used GZIL for protocol governance. So very recently, I think around 3 months ago, someone from the community decided to put out a proposal to increase gas fees for ZIL transactions. So when you send ZIL transfers, the fees were very, very low. And the community member felt that it would be good to increase that gas price in some way. So there was a voting around that. GZIL obviously is going to be used for pillar governance as well. Number three is there is a community initiative called Ignite, which also provides a staking node as well. And what they're basically doing is they are providing a mechanism in which you could bypass unbonding. So today, when you stake your ZILs into Zilliqa staking program, you have 14 days before you can take that money out.
Right.
This is basically to reduce the case where there's a flash exit in some way. If there's a flash exit, then it can create security issues for us. So that's why this unbonding period is more like a preventive measure for that. So what Ignite is doing is they're building a system where you would be able to stake through them, and you could bypass unbonding and withdraw assets from them by paying a small fee. So for example, let's say in today's Zilliqa staking system, if you withdraw, you don't pay any fee. I mean, you pay the transaction fee, but you don't pay any penalty. But in Ignite's case, when you want to withdraw, let's say before the 14-day period ends, you have to pay, I don't know, 1% or 2% to the Ignite system to be able to allow you to withdraw. So that's
okay. And there could be things in the future that you will be working on that the GZILs could become really valuable to hold on to, that things you haven't even thought about yet. I mean, maybe 3 years down the road, we have no idea what it could do.
Yes, so GZIL, I'm sure that, again, a lot of things will be built from our side, but I'm sure more will be built by the community. And we are already seeing that sense already. People do see that GZIL has a value. And even though initially it was designed not to have a value, or it was kind of a valueless worth, governance token, but people clearly have given it a value. And I'm sure that more use cases will come on from our side and as well from the community.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, exciting stuff. And also, I'm still in this from another interview. I was, doing some research, obviously, before hopping on this call. And someone asked you about what is your 5-year plans, and you're like, well, that's like, in blockchain, that might as well be 35 years, like dog years, right? So that's okay. Can you tell me what's your, say, 2 or 3 year plan for Zilliqa?
Yeah, so I definitely agree that, 5-year plan in blockchain world doesn't work, simply because, if you look at DeFi, for example, and the raise that it created, DeFi didn't exist 2 years ago, 3 years ago. it suddenly happened, and I think
Right.
it created the momentum that we all know and see today. From my angle, I do feel that we have to be agile. So you start with a small and short roadmap, and then go ahead and aggressively on that. And if something changes, you shift your direction and see what works after that. Because in the end, we are still in a very experimental stage. We're trying to understand what how blockchains can really help to bring average users onto the platform.
Right.
So what I'm seeing right now is obviously we are going to continue on the DeFi roadmap. So for example, we are looking into, and we are seeing that the communities wants to build things like synthetic assets. They want to have a lending protocol to be able to lend ZILs and other stable coins. There are people wanting to build another DEX. This DEX could be, for example, for stable assets, so like assets like Curve. There are people who are building Oracle systems as well. There are people who are building risk transfer mechanisms, so you could actually buy and trade risks, especially, for example, regarding the COVID situation that happened. You could have risks associated with the COVID that you could buy and sell.
Well, sorry, I don't understand that actually. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so imagine, for example, very simply put, imagine you are buying a risk that covers, it's like insurance. You're buying a risk cover that basically covers, let's say, any calamity, for example. Let's say tomorrow a tsunami happens or something happens.
So it's like insurance or life insurance.
It's like insurance, right? It's like insurance. And you could basically trade that as well. So for example, you bought it, but today, for example, you feel that, I don't need it anymore, but someone else needs it. So you actually go and trade that as well. So there are people trying to build sort of risk transfer protocols as well on Zilliqa.
Okay.
So there's a lot of DeFi activity being built. Obviously, once the bridge goes to live, you could also have stable assets coming over from Ethereum. So for example, USDT, Ethereum, and BTC could be brought over. And once you have these assets, you can put those assets into, I don't know, Pillar protocol, and then you can mint stable coins out of that. So a lot of activity will continue to happen on the DeFi side. We're also focusing a lot on the NFT and social tokens as well. So for example, we have a project called XCAD, which is launching a token around YouTubers. So YouTubers.
Right. I remember writing about that a long time ago in my group. I remember that, and I'm glad you brought it up, XCAD, because there's some influencers that are going to be promoting, or maybe they already are promoting Zilliqa blockchain. About the, let's talk about this a little bit more, because I'm a YouTuber, so I would like to be apprised of what's going on with that.
Right. So imagine, for example, again, it applies to both early YouTubers and established YouTubers, right? So if you look at, let's say, early YouTubers, imagine, for example, I'm venturing into the space of influencers, and I'm still young, and I'm still sort of building my follower-ship. Imagine, how could I attract fans and followers towards me, so that they can watch my content, they have the incentive to continue and help me grow in some way. So you could imagine a DeFi-like program where you provide people incentives to sort of help you grow as an influencer. And what I mean by help you grow, not as in technical skills, but more like grow as followers. So you want more and more followers, and you want your fans and followers to help you get that. Okay? And that's where the angle of tokens comes into play. So you use that token to incentivize people. So for example, if you reach, let's say, I don't know, 10,000 followers, then you reward your followers who helped you reach that, who helped share and like your comment and on your YouTube channel video. So in a way, you are growing alongside your followership, and you're helping and incentivizing your people to do that. You could even take that for established YouTubers and influencers as well, where they want to maximize from their fan base. So as you can imagine, when you have a YouTube channel, of course, some people go and watch, some people go and like, some people go and comment. So there are all kinds of people. You want that engagement to be more and more, it has to increase over time. And you want to have an incentive program that allows you to create that engagement level. So that's what XCAD is about. So XCAD creators would be able to issue tokens that could be tradable on a marketplace or a DEX. And you are basically incentivizing both sides. One, you're incentivizing the followers to follow, share, like, and share your content. At the same time, you grow as individual when these people give you more followers.
Okay, what's the website for that? So
this is XCAD, I think, .token or community, I think is the website. If you just search XCAD, I think in Google, you will find it.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, And I want to talk about too, and I remember writing about this a long time ago as well, and I was following this. I haven't heard much about it recently, or maybe in a few months, but could you talk about HG Exchange? I don't know, this is not your project. I mean, this is obviously someone building, tokenized stocks, on your blockchain. I mean, can you talk about that? I mean, what's going on with that?
Yeah, so HGX, just for the context, for those who don't know, HGX is a securities exchange that is licensed by MAS, and MAS is the local regulatory body in Singapore, which is in a way equivalent to SEC. Let's put it that way, the US. So I think it started around 2-3 years ago, when the idea was we were looking at, of course, ICOs were dying. We were seeing that it was very difficult to do fundraise. So one idea that came into mind was, can you actually tokenize, digital assets? Can you tokenize real world assets or traditional securities? So for example, can you tokenize real estate? So imagine, for example, you have a building, you could tokenize that building and be able to trade tokenized shares of that building. You could imagine, for example, providing a liquidity to private equities. So you could have, for example, SpaceX. So equities that are not publicly tradable on stock market. You want to be able to provide a marketplace where you can see that liquidity. So that was the idea behind HGX. So of course, it's a securities exchange, so we needed to get the license to be able to operate on that. So so HGX applied for a license with MAS. We went into a sandbox sort of environment where you can operate, but you have certain restrictions of what you can do. Very recently, I think a month or two ago, we graduated from sandbox. So now HGX is a fully operational live exchange that has all, no restrictions are now there on HGX now, so you can actually do anything.
Okay.
Very recently, they tokenized whiskey, Scottish whiskey.
Yeah, I saw that, and I'm a little confused. Well, I guess I understand that, but so basically, it's like you said, tokenized. You can invest in like investable whiskey, I guess, right?
Yes.
Maybe I don't understand whiskey that much. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So imagine, for example, let's say you are an investor and you want to invest in very high-end whiskey, for example. Right? But that might be very expensive for you because maybe they don't sell in bottles. Maybe they sell in huge quantities. There could be all sorts of things, right? Maybe a bottle costs $1 million and you don't want to spend that much money. So the idea is for HGX is that they buy big casks of whiskey. So they buy whiskey in mass. And you as an investor, you can buy a bottle in that. So even though it's not bottled up yet, you're basically buying a bottle that doesn't exist. What basically it means that this entire barrel of whiskey has been tokenized into bottles, and you're buying bottles of whiskey. Okay. That's what HGX gives you. So it gives you a possibility for an investor to come and say, okay, I don't have the money to buy the entire barrel or the cask. I'm only going to buy a small whiskey. But again, it doesn't exist, but I can tokenize that barrel of whiskey. Imagine like a barrel of whiskey, you cut that into different chunks, and then you sell that chunk.
It's just like tokenized assets, tokenized stocks, real estate, like we were talking about earlier. So, well, I saw something else too, which it seems kind of weird. It says in this paper that I got in front of me, talked about how you can tokenize human beings, and that sounds a little bit creepy, to be honest with you. But what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so this is something that comes around XCAD and those sort of assets. So imagine, for example, today. I am I'm a YouTuber, or I'm an artist, I'm an author, and I'm really good, let's say, but I don't have funding. I don't have funding to write a book. I don't have funding to be able to buy, let's say, the paint work that I need to be able to do to paint or do a digital artwork. What I can do is I can basically go out and say, look, you fund me today, let's say $10,000. And if I sell my painting or if I sell my book in the next year or so, the royalty from that will be shared with all of you. So essentially, you are seeing that you're not investing in traditional ways. You invest in an entity, you invest in a company. And what you're saying that don't invest in a company, invest in me as a person. So you invest in me, and if I make money, you make money. That's kind of the idea behind sort of humanized stock market.
Okay. So it's not quite as creepy as I thought it was then.
No, it may have a negative connotation to it, but the idea is basically can you make yourself your worth tradable in a market?
Yeah.
And this is definitely possible.
But Amrit, does that qualify as a security or no?
It could depends on how SEC and different people trade this, but it could depend on what sort of features you give to your token holders.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, the regulations are not very clear at this stage what it means. But again, yeah, the idea is really interesting because there's no reason why, even if let's say today, when you invest in a company, what you're basically investing in is not in the entity itself, right? You're investing in the fact that this entity has an idea.
Right, right.
You're investing in the fact that there is a founder who is capable enough to drive that idea forward and execute that idea. So in a way, you're basically investing in that company, in that people or the idea.
Right.
Entity is basically a way for you to make it possible. And what this humanized stock market basically saying that, sure, you could go and invest in my company that does book writing or content creation or whatnot. You could also directly invest in me as a person, and I would be able to give you certain incentives to do that. And that could be, for example, again, using tokens.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good.
Again, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take me on this. But I do feel that, of course, I do feel that there's an opportunity there. And again, maybe the regulations have to come in the right way to be able to handle that. But yeah, I do feel that there's a value behind it.
Okay. Interesting. Well, we are almost at 60 minutes. I want to wrap this up here. I want to just ask you, I mean, obviously you were trying to grow the Zilliqa company, the blockchain and the project. And do you feel that you're very overlooked? Maybe people are paying more attention to this token or this project or whatever. Do you feel like you're kind of still under the radar, and do you see yourself like really getting people's attention in this year, next year, maybe hopping into the top 20 on CMC? I mean, I know we're not going to talk token price. I know, but what do you see though? What are your aspirations and what are your goals for that?
Look, I do feel that, of course, crypto space is still very speculative in nature. That's very apparent, which also means that some newer projects, when they launched, people do get hyped about it, and therefore you do see a lot of newer projects getting more attention than older ones.
Right.
But in the end, we have seen we have gone through those cycles. If you look at the CMC of 2 years ago and you compare that with today, it's very different. The tokens that were in top 20 2 years ago, many of them are not in probably even outside of top 100 now.
Right.
So what I believe is that as long as you keep building, as long as you can attract users to your platform, there's no reason that you can be overlooked for too long. It has to come out. And we are seeing that people who are seeing traction today are the ones who are able to drive applications, who are able to drive more users to the platform. And that's, I think, our goal is. Again, we have been, for example, at, I think, rank number 30, 35, I think, a few months ago. I do feel that this market ranking and cycles, they shuffle every few months. And it's all about making sure that you are laser focused on what you think is right for this community, is right for the blockchain space, and keep delivering that and making sure that the community is aligned with your narrative and with your vision. And as long as that happens, I think over time you'll definitely see the success that you deserve. Okay.
All right. Well, that's going to lead me to the absolute last question, because I know, and I already got the answer, but not everybody saw the interview that I saw a few days ago. And this gets asked a lot, and you probably know what I'm going to say already. When is Zilliqa going to ramp up their marketing? And how are they going to do it? And I already know your answer, but I want you to, if you don't mind, just tell me what your plans are and how you do that.
Sure. So again, I must say that, there's a lot of, some people don't understand what marketing means, because it's not a single bullet where, you could just say, okay, everything can be swept under marketing. Oftentimes when people come back to me and say, okay, you're not doing this or doing that, but in fact, that's not marketing. What they're talking about is BD work, business development work. So marketing, and of course, there's a difference between business and business development and marketing, but many times people often get confused with that. I do feel that, of course, there are areas where, if you look at all the metrics today, some of those metrics are actually also on the slides that you're referring to, in terms of how much your community is growing, how much your number of people who are using your chain are growing, how many dApps are being built on a daily basis. A lot of these metrics we are doing quite well. There are definitely areas where we can improve. For example, in, let's say, influencer marketing, something that I think we need to push our pedal on. And that's kind of why we are here and we're talking with you, Dave. But the idea is, obviously, there are certain areas that we have to improve upon. especially around influencer marketing, something that we definitely have to ramp up.
Mhm.
But if you look at general metrics, I don't think we are doing bad in terms of community growth, in terms of people using platforms. Zilliqa, for example, is a DEX that is being used by more people than the darlings of Ethereum, like Curve and Synthetics. So it shows to you that people are actually using it. But yeah, there's one area obviously that we feel that we have to ramp up, which is around influencer marketing, that we are definitely going to ramp up on.
Okay, good. I know the listeners are going to be happy to hear that, because that's been a question a lot of people's been asking. And I know these things take time, and really a lot of times the best marketing is just making a really good product that's not going to collapse, later on, like some projects do, or just disappear. So, building a great foundation is marketing in itself, in my opinion, but you still obviously have to get the word out there, and what you're doing now. And, like you said, doing these interviews helps a lot too. So, well, that's all I got. And hey, Amrit, I really appreciate you taking the time to get on this call with me today. And I think this interview is going to make a lot of ZIL investors happy, and maybe bring some new ones on board. We'll see. And best of luck to you. And maybe if you like, a few months down the road, when things start getting more developed and you have some new things you want to talk about, I'd be happy to do another call with you if you'd like to.
Definitely would love to. Thank you very much, Dave, for your time. And
all right,
lovely
man. Take care. Thank you.